You're listening to the Snob OS podcast, the podcast for Apple snobs. Hey, this is Nika Montford, aka Tech Savvy Diva.
Yo, this is Terrence Gaines, aka Brother Tech.
And welcome to the Snob OS show, the show for Apple snobs, where we talk all things Apple and then some. Welcome back, everybody, to this week's show. We definitely want to take a quick second to thank you for your continued support and tuning in and listening and watching. If you want to get a little bit of extra Snob OS, you can become one of our patrons, which we lovingly call the Snobist, by going over to patreon.com/snoboscast to get all the details on how you can watch our show live and get exclusive content. So before we get into the show this week, I did want to, acknowledge that we record on Wednesdays and today is the day after the election. I have to say I almost didn't want to record today, but I am definitely under the distinction of doing things that bring you joy in spite of. And one of the things I really enjoy doing is bring you the show along with Terrence. And so we're going to definitely take this time, even though, initially I was like, this seems kind of like pointless, but then I was like, no, it's not.
You went into the despair.
I did. I was there for a minute, even getting the show prep for today. I was super late. I didn't do the show notes how we normally do them because I was completely off the grid today. No TV, no social media. I was limiting, the text conversation that I was having because I was like, listen, this feels a lot like it did in 2026. That's what I said before I went to bed. And I woke up to the same result. And so I was like, you know what? I don't have it in me. I don't have it in me this time around. So I was like, I'm just going to disengage. But then, I realized that life does go on. And again, we have to find the joy in things in our life because that's all we really have. And so I did want to put that out there to say that we are not completely ignoring what happened. We'll talk about it a little bit later in the show. Again, even then, I don't want to spend too much time on it. But, definitely we are both culturally aware. We've talked about culturally sensitive things before, and we'll definitely tap into that a little bit. But I more wanted to try and get back to a sense of normalcy, even though it feels as if we won't have that again. So I definitely did want to preface that to say we're not oblivious. We do know what's going on in the world. But in this moment, we're choosing to do something that we enjoy and that brings us joy. And that we hope brings you joy as well. So with that, we are going to kick off the show with the Lowdown, where we talk all things Apple. So starting off up front, Apple reports their Q4 of this year earnings with nearly 95 billion. That's B with a billion in revenue. So in the first report that Apple has released for their fiscal fourth quarter, which typically follows, the typical every January 1, August 1, October 1, that type of cadence. And it's 94.93 billion in revenue during just a 3-month period. According to this article in 9to5Mac, that's up 6% year over year. So it's one of those things where there was a lot of conversation, especially around when iPhone 16 launched, and people were saying, oh, it's not selling, it's lower than previous years. Something's selling because they earned almost $100 billion in a 3-month period. So that's pretty extraordinary. So, the math is not quite mathing. So what's going on here?
Well, hate to be cliche, but two things can be true. People weren't saying the iPhone wasn't selling. What they were saying was the sales at specific times were lower than iPhone sales at the same
years.
specific times previous years, right? When
Mm.
Apple makes this announcement, or well, let me not say announcement. When Apple does their iPhone event in September or October, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gangbusters, right? They can count on iPhone sales to go crazy.
Mm-hmm.
iPhone sales did go crazy, but not as crazy as last year. And then that's where everybody was, interpolating, oh, Apple's falling off and
Mm-hmm.
people ain't buying the iPhone 16 because they launched it with Apple Intelligence. And I opined that the only reason that I can think of that people are possibly waiting and not jumping out the window as soon as it's available is they kind of want to see what Apple Intelligence. That could be true. But also, Apple ain't fell off either.
No.
They still selling products. If it's not iPhones, it's Apple Watches. I would assume Apple Watches is assuming is the second best seller to the iPhone. Right,
actually, it's not. So
okay.
They give a little breakdown. So iPhone revenue out of that total 94.93 billion, iPhone 46.2 billion. That's their golden goose, and that's up 5.5% year over year. So that's up 5.5%. Next up is services.
Right.
Services are up almost 25 billion. That's almost 12% increase year over year. Next, we have wearables. That means your Apple Watch, home accessories like your HomePods, and other accessories like keyboards, mouse. That is the revenue bump is attributed. That's just over 9 billion. So that's up. No, it's down 3%. So wearables, home devices, and accessories. Those were the only thing that went down, and they went down by 3%. Next, Macs, 7.7 billion. That's up almost 2% year over year. And in last place, iPad with almost 7 billion, but that is up almost 8% year over year. So that's kind of how it kind of falls into the view of what makes up this almost $100 million in revenue in 3 months.
All right. So basically it's services that's not necessarily keeping Apple afloat, but the biggest gainer from last year is almost 12%. So you got, like you mentioned, iPhone by far is number one, and then services is number two, followed by wearables, and then followed by iPad, wearables, and then the Mac. So all that to say, sure, iPhones aren't selling as well as they did last year at this time, but they're still up 5%, and they still are the lion's share of Apple's revenue. So sure, 500,000 people, for example, didn't go buy the iPhone 16 when it first came out. Maybe it wasn't 500,000. Maybe it was 490,000 people, which 10,000 people less. Yeah, you can say, oh, they didn't sell as well, but they still up. So,
still winning.
Yeah. So I'm not concerned in the least.
Especially when the share revenue went up almost $1.50, $1.48. So whenever your share prices go up, and especially over $1, that's pretty good. That is pretty good. So we'll see, beginning of next year, what the overall annual revenue looks like. But with a third quarter that, did this good, with holiday season coming up, that really bodes well for Apple. So they're like, hey, give us our money, and we appreciate it. Next up, smart glasses. So there have been, I saw this on a couple of different sites. Apple really is taking the Apple glasses. If you think of the Ray-Ban, Meta kind of collaboration, and Facebook, they launch their prototype version as well. So according to this internal study, Apple is reportedly, got to throw that in there, gauging interest in what people think about smart glasses. We all know that Apple Vision Pro was launched, and it came, I say it came with a thud, but really it didn't. It came in as expected. It appears Tim Cook and the whole crew over there knew that a small amount of people who are really, on the early adopter tip. I thought I was on the early adopter tip, and I was initially thinking about getting the Vision Pro, and then I was like, I can't justify $3,500 for these things, especially with other rumors that aren't kind of including this. There's a cheaper version that is on the way out with like an M5 chip, but that's been pushed back. I think it's supposed to come out 2025, which is next year in a couple months. I think that's being pushed out to 2026. But all that to say, Apple is trying to get a sense of what people think, or to gauge their interest, see how interested they are in getting an actual glasses and not one of those goggle kind of like over the ear things that you don't have to walk around with the battery pack and all those extra things. And I think it's smart that they are doing this, and I think they probably will find that people are pretty interested in this. I think it just depends a lot on the price point, and then secondly on the functionality of what people can expect. Apparently, the study is being conducted by Apple's own product systems quality team, which is included in the hardware engineering side of Apple, because you have to think there's a hardware side, there's a software side as well. And this is happening. And apparently there's plans for focus groups that are supposed to be coming out in the near future. I wonder how you get on the focus groups. Let me know. I'll be in
so
that.
that kind of leads up to what I was going to say. Yeah, Apple is doing a study, but this is an internal study with their own employees, with mentions of additional focus groups in the near future. My guess is even with those additional focus groups is going to be
internal
Apple fans, brand loyalists, internal Apple employees, or contracting companies that work with Apple, whether they sub out work or whatever the case may be. So I don't think they're going to get an unbiased opinion on whether or not Apple should launch or produce or manufacture Apple glasses, right? I'm curious as to why this is even needed, because we kind of already knew that Apple was going to make a less expensive, more AR focused pair of glasses, even when they announced the Vision Pro, which is probably why a lot of people hung back and didn't or could not justify the $4,000 price tag, because we just knew they're going to come out with the a less expensive, more more
non-pro line version of the Vision Pro, maybe Vision Air, Vision Light, or just Vision,
right.
So
I assumed everybody already knew that, including Apple. So I'm curious as to why they feel like they need to do this internal thing to gauge interest, when, again, you're going to get totally biased people. And two, we kind of already knew this was coming.
I wonder if it's just the appearance that they're going for, that they did research, but why would you care about that appearance? I mean, you're Apple, for Christ's sake. We just talked about in one quarter, you made almost $100 billion in revenue. So it's interesting that they would. And according to Bloomberg, the company sent out an internal email asking select employees who are at Apple Park to participate in the study. And the email said, quote, "Testing and developing products that can come to love is very important to what we do at Apple." Further says, "This is why we are looking for participants to join us in an upcoming user study with current market smart glasses. So it sounds like they are going to test out current glasses that are already out
Mm-hmm.
there and then
Mm-hmm.
kind of compare it or get a feel of what you like about these, what you could improve, and potentially put those improvements or add those things that they like into their product. So again, like I said, this like it's not that surprising, but I think this is probably one of the first times where we're really seeing that they are making a concerted effort to go along the AR side, VR side, which I think was the intent all along, and that they came out with the Vision Pro almost, to me as like a false flag. And maybe these glasses were what they originally wanted to do, but they had to put something out there. So I don't know. It's interesting to see, how they come to decisions about what their product roadmap looks like and what they decide to release. So again, we here at the Snob OS Cast are Apple enthusiasts. So if you want to include us in your study, hit up the email snoboscast@gmail.com and let us know. We would be down for that. Up next. So if you have iOS 18.1, which a lot of people have, and I've seen a lot of complaints from people with iOS 18.1, just for, I think, the fact that some of the interface is a lot different than what it was previously. Well, typically, if you upgrade, it's like, you know what, this really isn't my jam. Let me downgrade back to what I had before because I liked it better. Well, sorry, not sorry. According to Apple, they have decided to stop signing the iOS 18.0.1 that we know included all the stuff for the security stuff, and it had everything except Apple Intelligence. Well, what the stop signing means is that you will no longer be able to downgrade from 18.1. So it's one of those things where, like I said, you can go up and say, yeah, let me use this. And then it's like, you know what? I changed my mind. I don't want it. So, it's one of those things where they're like, we are going to not allow you to downgrade if you already have. And I personally think, I'm trying to scan through the article to see if they specifically say, but I think for me, it's likely one of those things specifically around, one, security issues, and two, I don't think they want to see those numbers of people dropping back down, because the whole point is to get 18.1 out there and have people using it. And if people use it and then change their mind, that doesn't look so good.
I think it's security. I don't think I don't think it's a big issue if people decide they want to stay with 17 dot whatever or 18.0 or whatever the case may be. I think it's security. Apple doesn't want to be liable for people who are trying to stick to or downgrade to a previous version. They lose those security patches, which was a big part of iOS 18 outside of Apple Intelligence and all the stuff that they announced. So I think Apple's purely like, you can't go back because we patched something important. And what we don't want to happen is you go back and get exposed, because you're not going to be like, oh, shucks, I shouldn't have downgraded. You're going to be like, Apple, it's your fault.
Yeah.
So instead of Apple just dealing with that, they're like, look, you can't go back because we fixed too much. In addition to that, I'm curious, you mentioned a lot of people were complaining about the interface being different. Outside of being able to customize the lock screen and the home screen and change the colors of the apps, I can't think of anything. Again, I'm a techie, number one,
Right.
and I'm an Apple fan, number two. So some of these changes probably will come a little bit more natural to me than your average person. But I would think the ability to customize your home screen, to change the colors, to change the lock screen, the customization part would be intriguing to a lot of people. And all of the other kind of hidden stuff, they probably wouldn't mess with, but people would be engaged with that. Or you just don't mess with it at all. So I'm curious as to people who actually was like, I don't like this. You know what I'm saying?
The biggest thing that I've seen people complain about is the Photos app. They
Oh,
hate it.
oh my
I
God.
have people that I know, people that I've seen on social media that I don't know. Their biggest complaint is Photos, with the singular exception of the cleanup tool. They love the cleanup tool. They just don't like the way the Photos app now
Hmm.
is laid out. People are like, they have all this customization. Then why can't I customize it to look back the way it did before? So it's
Yeah,
one of those
there's some
things.
I can understand legitimate gripes, and then I can also don't get with, yo, stop being a curmudgeon. Things change.
Mhm.
Learn the new software. I
Yeah.
mean, again, I'm an Apple fan, and I'm a techie. So I actually like the new Photos app because it surfaces all the different buckets,
Hmm.
I will say, where my photos are, right? They've got suggestions, they've broken the albums and the people. Like before, they called it faces or something like that, and you had to go like 2 or 3 levels deep. Well,
Hmm.
now when you open up the iPhone app and then you scroll down just a little bit, you automatically get to see the people that you have assigned or that the interface suggests to you. And I would think that would be a benefit. It's like, oh, dope. So I can go to my pin collections. I can go to pictures in recent days
Hmm.
without having to go through a bunch of menus. With this, you just
Yeah.
scroll down. And then if you want to move stuff around, you can actually edit the buckets to where if you want to see featured photos up
Hmm.
front, you can move that up. If you want to see albums at the very, very bottom, you can move that down. So I'm kind of scratching my head on. It's like, well, if you don't like it, change it. But that's just
I
me.
think, like I said before, it's one of those things where people got accustomed to the photo apps looking one way, and now there's different. It's like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. And I know I responded to some people on social media, and this was before we got 18.1, and I said, in all likelihood, the changes that we see with the Photos app are likely meant. The Photos app is not just for me. I don't think just something they decided to aesthetically change just cause, like, hey, let's make it look different. I truly believe the more we get these feature releases for Apple Intelligence, the design of the photo apps is going to make more sense in the way of what we can do with Apple Intelligence, how these features will work, not just the ones that we got in 18.1 or even the ones in 18.2, but I think going forward, I think everything on this phone is designed to work with Apple Intelligence. And I think they got kind of, I hate to say the low hanging fruit first, but set things up like your Photos app, to be prepared for what's further down the line. And it could be to get you used to it up front, because honestly, outside of talking on your actual phone, most people use their phones for texting and photos. I think those are probably two of the biggest things that people
Hmm.
use their iPhones for. And getting something like the Photos app, getting those changes out first, getting people acclimated to those changes so that once we get down to 18.3 or 18.4, whatever the number is before we get to the next one, which is 19, is going to be in preparation and the alignment of how these features that come with Apple Intelligence will work. That's my kind of, uninformed, kind of theory, but I think that's kind of what it looks like to me. That's what it appears to be, and to me, that's what makes the most sense. But could be wrong, could be right. I
People,
guess time will
people
tell.
just
But
complaining, just
people don't,
complaining.
and honestly, people don't like change as much as they say they like change. I don't think they really like it too much, especially if it's something change that they really like or have gotten used to. It's like, put it back, please, thanks. But
Hmm.
it's one of those things I was like, you're gonna have to deal. You're gonna have to learn how to use it, because this is it. This is what we got. So
Right.
the last thing up in the lowdown is regarding SOS, emergency SOS. We've talked about this before. We talked about when it first came out. We talked about it when, it was eligible only on, I think when it first came out was iOS 14. And it's one of those things that we talked about a little bit when the hurricanes, Helene and I forgot the other one, but I think the Helene was the big one, how people are using emergency SOS to communicate with, their family, those types of things, because it is for emergency services. Well, Apple has expanded the service deal on the satellite end, and they've committed to expanding it to about $1.1 billion. So this is a collaborative effort with a global star that basically is the expansion of the deal in exchange for this 1.1 billion of influx of money for things like the infrastructure, capacity for satellites. Is that Apple will take a 20% ownership of a global star. So if you remember back when satellite emergency SOS came out, it was going to be free up to 2 years. That free portion was supposed to end in 2024, I think around this time, but Apple extended it to 2025. And I think it's one of those things where the thought process, because it'll probably be free up to this point, maybe 2.5, maybe 3 years. Now that they have kind of cemented their relationship with Global Star, it's one of those things where now the question is, how is this how are we going to pay for this? And as we mentioned earlier in the Lowdown, we talked about services being the second most revenue positive for Apple. How do you think this collaboration with Global Star and the fastly approaching into free services is going to work? What are your guesses on that?
I would call it less of a collaboration, more of a acquisition. Even though Apple's only taking 20% ownership, they are paying out $1 billion upfront, which sounds like a cash payment to me. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure most of it will go to infrastructure, but I'm pretty sure there's some executives, CEOs, some high level people is going to get a nice raise, right? And as a result, Apple's going to have more say so into how they run things. Now, 20% ownership isn't the majority, so ultimately the CEO or whomever that's calling the shots has the ultimate say. But they got to keep in the back of their mind that Apple put up an additional $1 billion, and at any time, Apple can take their money and go home. They don't need, I say they don't need. It's not a requirement that Apple sticks with Global Star. And $1 billion for Apple is a drop in the bucket. Yeah. So having said that, what Apple says is probably going to go. So if you're asking me how you think the collaboration, the partnership is going to work, it's going to work just fine because Apple put up that money. Now, as far as Apple charging us for that satellite service, I don't know. That is a good question because it's doing a lot of good. We see stories all the time about people, like you mentioned in the hurricanes, people able to contact loved ones, to contact 911 services, and to get them out of some pretty tight jams. I don't know if you're going to have time if you hemmed up to be like, all right, let me sign up for SOS first, and let me put my Apple Wallet, my credit card in here just to get this right. You want it to work when it works. But I don't think a lot of people are going to take even the people who put themselves in these situations, climbers, people, trail hikers, people out to sea, skiers, all these people who would need it. I'm pretty sure they're not saying, all right, before I go out here, let me make sure I paid for this emergency.
My subscription is up to pay.
Right. Nobody's doing that. But at the same time, when they have it available as a feature on their phone, they just want it to work. I think Apple will take that into strong consideration. And I wouldn't be surprised if this emergency SOS feature remains free, for inevitable future.
That's an interesting take. And another thing I kind of want to highlight out of this, after this acquisition, partnership, whatever you want to call it, the stock for Global Star shot up. So that's another thing, you know, they're going to have to take into account, like, hey, yeah, you gave us all this money, but then our stock prices also shot up. So I'm sure that made our stockholders very happy as well. So again, it'll be interesting to see if we have to pay a fee for this, or if they roll it into, you know, like a bundle with Apple One or whatever the case may be, or if they just say, hey, this is a service that we offer and this is what we're going to include, and just another benefit of having an Apple product to maybe hopefully drive more people to purchase a product if something like this is already built in, when we've seen the net positive result from people using this. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see with Global Star and this influx of cash, if the cost of this will trickle down to the consumer, or if Apple will just say, hey, this is the price of doing business. So we'll see. We have up until next year to see how it kind of plays out. So that's going to wrap it up for the lowdown. We're going to head on over to Second String, where we talk all other tech. So I saw this particular thing, and I definitely want to get your opinion on whether this was intentional or whether this was truly accidental. So Google, according to this article on Tom's Guide, unintentionally confirmed the existence of its advanced AI, which is called Jarvis. Isn't that what
Gemini I thought was?
That's what I thought Gemini was. So maybe this is a step more advanced than Gemini.
And then they got Bard, and then they've got Google's Bard AI. So I'm confused. I'm all the way confused with what Google is doing, because we got Bard, and then we had Gemini. Now we got this code named Jarvis that, like you mentioned, intentionally probably was leaked. But I am confused about what Google is doing as far as AI, because it seems like they've got a lot of irons in the fire
that do the same thing.
Which do the same thing, and it's not surprising, or it's not, historically speaking, it's not a stretch for Google rather to have all these things in the works and just be like, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. So maybe they're putting all these things out in parallel to see which one takes off.
Which one's the best?
Yeah, and then kind of focus on that one, because again, you know, I'm not a Google person. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like 3 separate products or projects that do the same thing,
that are coming out relatively around the same time, because like Bard and Gemini kind of stepped on each other. Or did Gemini replace Bard? I don't remember. It was something kind of funky about those two, because I think Gemini came out, then there was some issues and they shelved it, and then next thing you know, we got Bard, but then Gemini, I don't know. In any event, Jarvis, which was this the name? What was the name in Iron Man?
That's it, Jarvis.
Jarvis. I was like, this sounds really familiar. It has to be that. And I'm surprised that Marvel actually allowed that, because it seems
it's like a code name, and it's an internal code name, so you can call those whatever you want until it goes to production,
and they give it the real name.
Right. You know, Project Titan was Apple's car.
Apple car, yeah.
Right. You know, and Titans, you know, we've heard that around for a long time. So it's just a code name.
Okay. I was thinking it was the real name. Okay, cool. So eventually, ultimately, the whole point of this conversation is that this was unintentionally leaked or exposed. The documents were published on Google's own cloud platform, and then they were quickly removed. But by that time, once it's on the internet is forever. And someone grabbed it. And so it's one of those things where it's apparently this advanced version was revealed to be an AI agent capable of browsing the internet and autonomously retrieving information. Now that to me sounds a little, I don't know.
Well, it sounds like it's stepping on.
You have to do it you just go out there by yourself and just search the internet. Like,
Well, it
How?
sounds like it's stepping on Google's search toes. Is this a
Right.
faster version of Google search? Is it using Google search? Because it
Is it a
says, like you
replacement?
mentioned,
Like what?
like you said, offering offering users the ability to retrieve real time data, bypassing traditional search engines. The
When
most
they are the
traditional,
traditional search
right,
engine.
right. The most traditional search engine is Google. So is Jarvis stepping on Google's search's toes? Is it going to replace Google search? Is it going to be an additional add up? Again, it's all confusing because again, Google seems to be doing a lot in the same categories. And
Right.
it's like they're just trying to see, all right, which one takes off? What is everybody else doing? Because it says also the leak comes a few days after OpenAI's own O1 model leak, which
Mm-hmm.
exposed a new model that can analyze images and access tools like web search and data analysis. So that leads me to believe that Google unintentionally, intentionally, accidentally on purpose leaked this to stay in the conversation.
Yeah. And it says that in a source close to Google suggests that Jarvis was initially intended to be a pilot internal to the company before it was released publicly. And again, that's why I said, do you think it was a calculated, exposure or leak to be up on the website and then down? Because it says additionally that what Jarvis is supposed to do is it would be able to visit websites, make online purchases with your permission, and even fill out forms. And it's basically saying that it's a Chrome-based AI that would be the biggest upgrade since the browser launched in 2008.
Yeah, that sounds like even more of a resource hog. The Chrome's claim to fame was that if you install it on your computer, it's going to take up all of your
All the
memory and all your
resources.
RAM and
Yeah.
all the resources.
Yeah.
So since then they have kind of toned it down,
Mm-hmm.
but then they're going to ramp it right back up with this if it's supposed to do all the things like you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
going out, filling out forms and making purchases on your
Yeah.
behalf. Simply kind of reminds me of that Rabbit R1 thing. Remember that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
AI pen thing that
That
was
little
supposed to be
clip,
able that you could
you talk
script.
to it.
Yeah, you could script it to do things for you,
Mm-hmm.
like order an Uber.
Mm-hmm.
That was the more popular thing that it mentioned, that it kind of walked through the process. This
Mm-hmm.
kind of sounds like that. So maybe, Google's picking up where that thing left off, as far as being able to actually do things for you, right? Because Jarvis, in the not traditional, in the fictional artificial intelligence for Iron Man, he would
Mm-hmm.
do things for Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Do this, buy this, set
Uh-huh.
this up, launch that. So
Uh-huh.
maybe the reason why they're calling it Jarvis is because the main thing it's supposed to do is actually do things for me versus
Mm-hmm.
just surfacing information that I asked for.
Right. And a little further in the article, it does answer a little bit of our question around Gemini and Bard. And it says the functionality appears to be an extension of Bard, blending natural language understanding with advanced data retrieval capabilities. So it's it sounds like the next generation of Bard. And maybe Bard will get like a Bard Plus or something.
How are
Since
we
again,
already how are we already on the next generation? We ain't started. I mean, we started, but there has been no, outside of just helping me write emails
mm-hmm.
and helping me fix my resume and helping me make cute pictures online. And in addition to helping me find recipes,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that what AI is supposed to be? And if so, we need to let this cook a little bit more. But then that just goes back to my original point. It's like, yeah, we're full speed ahead without even deciding what this thing is going to be, and everybody's just trying everything,
Mm-hmm.
from proofreading emails to this latest thing from Google with this Jarvis, to where it can actually buy things on my behalf. Again, I'm not sure how I feel about that, but if we all decide that's what we want a computerized assistant to do, make barber, hairstyle appointments, book hotels, book rental cars, book vacation rentals, airplanes, whatever the case may be. If that's what we all decide, then cool. But we ain't all decided that yet. Everybody's like doing everything. It's like, all right, figure out the thing first and then figure out who can beat us, who can get there first.
So what I'm not surprised about, I'm not surprised that they have already thought and are working on the next generation. That's usually how the product roadmap works. What I am surprised about is the fact that they leaked this so soon when it's not fully baked. And if it truly is one of those things where it's like, somebody else was talking about their thing. We got that same thing too. We don't want to be left out of the conversation. So that's really the only shocking thing, is that they basically kind of put it out there, but did it. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. That's really, kind of the question mark that I have. But I think if you see people talking about AI, they thought this is what AI would be. And you see the statement kind of floating around a lot. I don't want AI to make art for me. I want AI to do the stuff so I can go and make the art for myself. Right. So it sounds like, this may be where people, want the AI to go. Again, that makes sense. And that would be super helpful. Again, my question mark and caveat is they don't have the security protocols in place. We don't have the regulations in place to. Well,
you can forget about regulations now.
listen, we're going to talk about it. But so it's going to be very interesting to see how it moves. And as you alluded to, now that we don't have any really guardrails, like, where is this really going to go? How is this really going to look? It's interesting because I think it is, to me, it appears that this was maybe a calculated leak, to kind of stay in the game of we can do that too type of thing. So that's going to wrap up the second string. And we're going to head on over into For the Culture, where we talk about things going on in our culture, Black culture, the world at large. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, we record on Wednesdays. You'll be listening to this on Friday, and this thing will still be going on, I'm sure, then. But today is the official day after election 2024. And I would be remiss if we didn't at least acknowledge what happened on Tuesday, November 5th. So I, just kind of wanted to do almost like a wellness check to kind of see how you're feeling after the events of Tuesday, election night.
So for those who have read between the lines, Donald Trump won the election against Kamala Harris by a pretty hefty margin.
Yeah.
And if you're asking me how I feel about it, I'm fine because I knew this was coming. I knew it. I knew that things wasn't going to go the way the majority of people hoped it would.
Yeah.
Simply because there were a lot of promises made that are excluding all of the madness that was happening with this election. Donald Trump made a lot of promises that appealed to a lot of people, which works when you're trying to get people to one time cast a vote in your favor, right? Past that, thank you for your service. We'll take it from here. And what I mean by that is I don't believe a lot of the promises that were made to get people to vote for Trump are going to come to fruition. Not even a The main ones, right? You talk about a lot of the things that people were concerned about was the economy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Without failing to reason, Trump is the reason why, a lot of the stuff is the way it is right now. Even though Biden was in office for the past almost 4 years, he's been doing a lot of fixing and
Fixing.
cleaning up, right? So, but they're pointing to, the economy as a main issue as to why they think Donald Trump would be the better candidate for the economy. And even with Congress and the House also leaning Republican, that
Mm-hmm.
would give the Republicans a supermajority. There are just some things that he promised that won't be able to be done. The tariffs, he mentioned that. But then, a lot of the tech industry titans, Elon Musk being one of them,
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure they're going to talk him off that ledge because those tariffs are going to mean more costs for these big companies, which will be more costs for us because companies are not going to eat that cost. They're going to trickle it right down to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just saying I'm going to fix the economy, or I mean, not saying, just saying I'm concerned about the economy and I think Donald Trump is the best man for the job. I think there's a lot more to it than that because you got to get companies involved. You got to get all these other things involved. And it's not just as simple as I'm going to make the economy better, which a lot of people heard that and was like, oh, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense because, gas is high, apartment rentals high, my car insurance is high, everything is high. And then somebody comes along and says, hey, those things that are high, I'm going to fix that. You're like, bet.
Without giving a plan. Yeah.
Right. Without any sort of plan. Right. Another thing was immigration. Right. A lot of people were concerned based off of false, fake, fear mongering things that, oh, we've got a lot of these people coming into our country illegally and they're causing problems. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the tenets was mass deportation. On day one, as soon as I'm sworn in, it's going to be the biggest mass deportation possible, right? That's the promise from Donald Trump camp. You can't mass deport, if that's the word,
That's the word they're using.
People,
yeah.
Millions of people, because one is going to cost too much. And you just said the economy is important. Well, if they're going to mass deport all these people, that bill is going to come to us. And you think things are expensive now? Just wait till that price tag come where they try to deport millions of people, right? Number one, it ain't feasible. And two, if it is feasible, it's going to be expensive, which is going to hit your pocket anyway. So that kind of falls down on that whole we're going to fix the economy thing, right? And then like I mentioned with the immigration, it's impossible to deport that many people in such a short time frame. You got to hire all these people, yada, yada, yada. Then on the third end of that is the people you are deporting, they are doing the jobs that y'all don't want to do. So when they are gone, that's going to leave a hole in the jobs market. And these people are not going to, us Americans are not going to jump in and take those jobs that are mysteriously available, not mysteriously, they are available now because all those people were deported, right? So it's like now you're going to have a work shortage. Work ain't going to be able to get done because don't nobody want to do the work for the cheap, right? So it's just like, okay, this is what you asked for. I don't want to hear no complaints.
Yeah. And, for me, if in Apple News, last night, they were doing live. You could follow the election coverage, and they put in the dynamic island. It kept a count going up, and I followed it initially, and then I was like, you know what? I don't need this. I don't need this in my life. So
let me ask. Let me ask. Would you need it if the election was going your way, or would you be like, I don't need this? Even though, okay,
even if it was going my way, I don't need that because it was too much. It it just added another level of
Anxiety.
to see it constantly, perpetually
Right.
on my screen. And then if I were to lock my screen, it would be on the lock screen. So it was
Right.
like you couldn't escape it. So I was like, yeah, I don't need this in my life. I'm adding more things and stress that I don't really need to have. And so for me, when I made the decision, you know, I had a couple text threads going, and it wasn't looking good. I know here in my town, my city, you know, earlier in the day, there were some bomb threats that were called into predominantly Black precincts. And this was maybe around 9 or so. There were bomb threats that were made at precincts in my town. And the city that I live in, it's literally, parts of it are kind of in Atlanta, parts of it are not. It's like very on the cusp of the city of Atlanta. And so it's one of those things where it was very sobering to see that even though they were non-credible, that those types of bomb threats are being called into Black churches, Black community centers. Even if you take the race out of it, out of any church, out of any community center, you know, the thought to do that. And it's one of those things where when I finally decided to kind of shut it down and go to bed, that's the same thing I did in 2016. And the last time I checked, you know, it was still, nothing was settled. And even a couple of times when I woke up in the middle of the night, I would check and I would still see it wasn't settled. And, you know, I knew which way it was going. I was still hoping, you know, for some sort of miracle, you know, at that point. But it's just one of those things that I was hopeful and I was very encouraged. I think like a lot of people were, because it looked on the front, on the surface, that, hey, we were going to pull this off and we're going to be finally rid of this guy. And then for it to take such a nosedive, it just really goes to show, particularly as a woman, even more specific as a Black woman, because we've seen this 2 times now. And the constant was gender. Both of these women, and when I say both, I'm referring to Hillary Clinton as well, supremely qualified, overqualified even, for this position. And for them to push Biden out the way they did, and for the way Kamala Harris was able to come in and do the things she did, running a near flawless campaign, being the essentially quote unquote perfect candidate. If she were a man, even if she had the same racial makeup, if she were a man, I firmly believe it would be no question.
Right.
But it just goes to show what, especially I can only speak to my lived experience as a Black woman, even being doing everything right, literally having experience in all 3 branches of government, only working in the public space her entire career, you know, having all of the things that you're supposed to have in a quote unquote perfect candidate, which we all know that there's no perfect candidate because there's no perfect human, and hitting the ground running, all the enthusiasm, all the get out the vote, all of the things, doing all the things that under any normal circumstance would easily give you a win, the landslide. It was not enough. It didn't work. It didn't matter. And I think to me, that was my biggest disappointment, because it just reiterates that people fail up. Certain people fail up. And not just fail because, oh, I'm not smart. I mean, the language that was used.
Sure.
The
attacks.
Incitement, the attacks. And not just on Black people, but all marginalized communities. And to see
Yep.
that these people
Same marginalized communities
still came out and voted against their own best interest. You know, racism is a hell of a drug. Sexism is a hell of a drug. And people voting against their own best interest. It's one of those things where it's always, Black women will save us. Black women need to go and do out the work. And, some of the commentary is, this group didn't show up, that group didn't show up. They are blaming the very people who did their part in this and not having a discussion, a frank discussion on why white women voted even at a higher rate than they had previously for him.
But we know why, though.
Yeah, that's what it's rhetorical. Yeah. Latino people, after he called them garbage, still turned out for him. And it's one of those things where it's the protection of one, white supremacy, because white women are going to be covered in that. Their whiteness is going to protect them. And for minorities, it's that whole model minority, your proximity to whiteness. I'm not Black, so I'm better and I'm closer aligned with that. It's one of those things where there is no fixing this. And what they have shown is they will use Black women to be the mule, as so to speak, or, you need to do all the work. I think outside of what this guy's administration is going to do, I think they're truly going to see what it looks like to not have support. Black women are tired. And I think this is going to really show.
You say they, you mean who's not going to have the support?
The Democratic Party.
Okay.
Marginalized groups, because every single time something happens to a marginalized group is Black women that are organizing, who are on the forefront, who are pushing, because when we vote for our best interest, and our best interest is usually
the best interest of everybody.
For everybody.
Right.
Right. And so now showing and seeing that, the whole saying, we all we got, we literally are all we got, because we have no allies. We have no support. We don't have people, who are willing to stand in the gap for us. And like I said in one of my texters, I was like, look, I'm giving everybody who isn't Black the perpetual side eye, because
it wasn't us, not this time.
It wasn't us. It wasn't Black women, and it wasn't Black men.
Nope.
It wasn't old Black people. It wasn't young Black people. We all did our part in this shit show. And it's one of those things where it's like, those ads that they were doing, with white women, and then eventually white men,
doing the head nod thing.
Yeah, and the secret vote. They weren't secretly voting against their husbands or their fellow genders. They were secretly voting against us.
Their coworkers and their kids' friends, and
some of y'all, and not just some, a lot of y'all were lying.
Right.
And it made them feel good and look good to be like, oh no, I am appalled, clutching their pearls all at the same time. They know that they're going in that booth to essentially cause harm to me. So I can't trust it. I can't trust none of it.
So it'll be interesting to see. You bring up a good point. It'll be interesting to see what the Democrats do going forward. And what I mean by that is there's been 2 occasions to where America at large has pretty much said women shouldn't be president of the United States. They can be everything else. They can be vice president. They can be senators. They can be Supreme Court justices.
Ambassadors.
They can be all that stuff. But what you can't be is president of the United States.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious to see how Democratic leadership does this going forward. Are they going to say, all right, we are going to continue to look for the best candidate, Or are Democrats going to say, all right, this experiment on 2 occasions
Uh,
did not work. We
uh-huh.
are going to go back to the 40-year-old family man, white dude, right?
That's a Christian.
That's a Christian that is fiscally conservative, but culturally and economically
Liberal.
and
Yeah.
liberal. You know that you can see the picture of
Oh
this
yeah.
guy, right? Almost like a Tim Walz, maybe. Maybe he may be a little bit too, you know,
I think he's too loosey
goofy,
goosey.
right?
Yeah.
They looking for that straight man,
Yeah.
and they are going to do that because they have, quote unquote, air quotes, tried this experiment trying to get other people. Obama was the exception because he just perfect storm, right?
Yeah.
But with 2 occasions we
Yeah.
tried this with women and it didn't work, so forget that.
I guess the
We're
same
going
guy.
back to right. Forget that. We're going back to the drawing
To the
board, or
cookie
to
cutter.
right, to the tried and true. And as a result, is that going to what is that going to look like as far as you mentioned black voters, right?
Yeah.
Are we going to continue? Are Democrats going to continue to court us?
Yeah. I think
And
I
or go ahead. Go
no, I was
ahead.
just say I think that the party is going to tilt more right.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I
Right.
think they are going to tilt more right, and kind of answering your question to what I think of, is the Democratic Party going to court us? One, I don't think they ever really courted us.
You know what I
Outside
mean?
of outside of needing us. And I
Right.
think what they're going to learn is, like I said earlier, we mean black women, black folks, vote for our best interest. I
Mm-hmm.
think they are going to see a sharp decline in black women showing up. Black women vote 94, I think they voted in 94, 95%
Mm-hmm.
for Kamala Harris,
Mm-hmm.
voted in the high 90s
Mm-hmm.
for Hillary Clinton,
Mm-hmm.
voted in the high 80s, low 90s for Joe Biden. And what do we have to show for it? I think this is going to be, they want to burn it all down, so they say, to build it back up. I think what they didn't or haven't taken into account, that burning it all down is going to be losing black women. I've
Well,
always said
go ahead.
I've never not participated in the election process because I know how hard it was for my people
Mm-hmm.
to be able to vote. And honestly, at this point, my mind may change once the rawness of this is over, but they can't count on me.
So you bring up a good
They proved themselves. They proved themselves. They can't count on me because I can't count on them.
right. So that leads me to my ultimate point, not ultimate point. I think this, stronghold of this voter block of black folks, right? It's probably now is a good time, since the Democrats, quote unquote, don't need us anymore, right? And then even
Mm-hmm.
going forward, the model candidate may look different, far different than what we're used to, right? Right now, is a good time for a third party
Mm-hmm.
to really rise up and make a name for themselves. Now, they're not going to, within 4 years,
No.
equate what the Republicans and the Democrats currently have, right? But at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, if there was any time to where it's like, all right, we ain't got nothing to lose, now would
Literally.
be a good time for the third party to really start to work with, collaborate, court this block that is tired, like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And two, for black people to be like, all right, man, we ain't got to be Democrats. Because number
No.
one, it don't work anyway. And number two, they only come to us when they need us. So
Mm-hmm.
now let's not necessarily a
We're gonna let
clean
you have
cut,
it.
not necessarily clean cut, but just like show Democrats, like, yo, we see what time it is, And now we're going to explore our options, right?
Yeah.
And I think that would go farther than, a lot of, not necessarily a lot of, but that sentiment of, forget the Democrats or forget voting altogether because it ain't working. Well, there's another option that we haven't tried yet en masse. Let's try that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll close this out by saying this one last thing. I am Black. Do not call me a person of color. I am a Black person.
You
with
really
the big B.
The minority, the other minorities really got you disappointed because they didn't do their job.
They didn't. They had one assignment.
Right.
Just one thing. Mm-hmm. And, it goes to show, I said this was my last thing, but this is my last thing. It goes to show, I'll say for North Carolina specifically, they voted blue down ballot, except for Kamala Harris. They got a Black governor. I mean, a Democratic governor, a Democrat lieutenant governor. I think they got some DAs. So basically, every other down ballot vote was blue,
right?
Except for her,
right?
So again,
that just goes to that we do not want a woman, and specifically, we don't want a Black woman running the country. You can do everything else,
even though you're supremely qualified,
right? We don't again, want like I said, this may be our time to be like, all right, well, let's try something new.
Yeah, because what we've been doing isn't working. And what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. That's going to wrap it up for the culture. Let's head on over to our tech tip of the week.
All right. So I watched a YouTube video, a Wall Street Journal YouTube video, Joanna Stern. She has been reporting on this story about your identity, your stolen identity as it relates to your Apple devices, right? And she actually went and interviewed a guy who is currently sentenced to prison for running a, iPhone theft, identity theft scam that pretty much he outlined what he does to get people's phones and to get into their passcodes. Because, a lot of us believe, all right, I got a passcode on my phone. You need that passcode. You need to crack that. You need to figure out how to get that. Well, this dude was like, they would give it to me. He would go to events, go to clubs. He would target like college age, 20s, late 20s, early 30s, white dudes specifically. And, he would proposition them with whatever, drugs, a good time, whatever the case may be. And he would say, all right, well, let me save my contact information in your phone, or let me save my Instagram or whatever point of contact. He would take their phone.
Okay.
He would act like he's putting in the code, and he would be like, oh, what's your code? And they would tell him what the code is. And then he would pretend or actually put a contact or fake contact in. Now that he has the code, he would then circle back around and rob them and take their phone and enter the passcode. And that's not even the crazy part. The crazy part is he would outline how fast he would change their device passcode, change their Apple account, lock them out of their email, and then run up their credit cards, all the little credit cards that are added to Apple Pay. And he would change the Face ID or the thumbprint to his. Once you do that, it's a wrap for everything. It's a complete wrap. For everything. He would outline how fast, like in 20 seconds, he would enter their passcode, change their Apple ID, change their Face ID to his, and then he would pretty much log into Cash App, Zelle, whatever, anything that required a passcode and run it up, right? So eventually he got greedy, was doing too much too fast, got hemmed up, right? Yeah. But that leads me to my hookup, right? One of the things that they mentioned is the stolen device protection. I think I've talked about it before, but I'm going to reiterate it again. What stolen device protection does is if somebody does get your phone and they do get your passcode, the stolen device protection puts a delay as to when you can make changes to your passcode, your Apple ID account, any of those high-level Apple services that you need passcodes Face ID, some sort of authentication. You can't do it immediately. And you need your Face ID in order to make those changes, because it's one thing to just put in your passcode, but in order to make some of those systematic, detrimental changes, the stolen device protection doesn't do it immediately. It doesn't do it around places it recognizes. So if I'm at home, I can change my password anytime I want to. Second, I step out of this geofence of my house, that's when the delay kicks in, right? So one, make sure stolen device protection is turned on, because that is your a main line of the defense. Number two, hookup is change your device passcode from digits only, whether it be 4 digits or 6 digits, change it to alphanumeric passcode. So when you enter your passcode to get in your phone, it needs to be alphanumeric and special characters, uppercase, lowercase, a number, and a special character. Now, I hear you already.
That's too much.
It's such a drag, and it's too much. Every time I got to put in my passcode, I did it with my kids, because yesterday I was so shook by this. I sat my kids and my wife down and was like, yo, as a family, during dinner, we're going to watch this video, and I want you to see how fast it is for you to lose your phone and lose everything else, right? And then I told them, I'm like, all right, y'all got to change your passcode. Oh, we don't want to do that. All right. What the first line of defense, again, for him to get into that phone was, what's your passcode? A 4-digit code is not hard to it's easy to remember and hard to forget, right? But if you've got a passphrase or even a passcode with some funny letters or whatever, even if he's watching you type it in, even if you tell him what it is, it's still harder to forget. It's
harder to memorize.
To memorize, for him to come back later and get it. What was it? Was it a number 1, or was it an exclamation point? Was it a 2? Was it a 3 or was it a 3? Right? That sort of thing. That's another thing. The third hookup is, do not put any sensitive information in your Notes app. And if you do put any sensitive information in your Notes app, lock the note with a passcode, and the passcode has to be different than the passcode that you just changed to put in your phone. You need a separate locked notes password, because what people don't think is, okay, they say, oh, we got the new passwords app, so I'm gonna put all my usernames and passwords in there. But then in the Notes app, they'll put their driver's license, they'll put the social security card in there, they'll put the access code to to your front door. You'll put all that in the notes, because in the passwords app, you're only thinking about website usernames and passwords and app usernames and passwords. You're not thinking about all the other sensitive things in your phone unprotected. Again, driver's license, social security number, birth certificate, your kids' information, all that's in the notes, and where I guarantee you, and if you're going to do that, which is fine, but you have to lock those notes up, and you have to lock them with a passcode other than your device passcode. So though I know it's kind of long in the tooth, but I wanted to reiterate, because I saw, and I'll try to put a link in the show notes to this YouTube was a Wall Street Journal interview, to where it was like frightening to me. And I'm an IT dude. And he said, as soon as I get that passcode, 30 seconds, you locked out. Wow. And then next step is I'm running up your credit cards, or I'm going to Apple and buying a bunch of Apple products, and then I'm returning them and taking the money, right? So it's just like, he did that he would say, like, in a weekend, I could get like $20,000 or $30,000.
Jesus Christ!
Just by befriending these people, getting their passcodes, very inconspicuous. Like, I've done that, handed somebody my phone so they can enter their name and number into my contacts, because it's like, all right, your name, that's a weird spelling, or here, just do it.
I don't want to fat finger it or mess it up.
Whatever the case may be. We got all this technology to where you can touch the phones, you can send the email, whatever. It's just like, here, and he would get their phone. He'd be like, all right, what's your password? And then in 30 seconds, you're locked out of your phone. You're locked out of your Apple ID, and you've got thousands of dollars in charges in an hour. And I was like, all right, that's crazy. So let me make sure I tell my family, and let me make sure I tell y'all that, please, it's going to be an inconvenience. You got to make a longer device passcode. You got to put a passcode on your locked apps, and please turn on advanced stolen device protection.
That's protection.
You do those 3 things, then it's going to be that much, not impossible, but it's going to be that much harder for somebody to get your phone and get in it and get your stuff.
Wow, that's insane. Definitely heed the notes on that. And again, once we post the show, we'll definitely put all those links to this in there so that you can be prepared and aware, because it sounds like a lot until you actually need it. And then you're like, oh crap, I wish I had it. But you didn't take the time to go through the steps to make sure that, because our lives are pretty much on these things, you know,
not pretty much, they are.
So it's like, do that. I know when I upgraded, when it said, do you want to turn the device protection? I was like, yep, go ahead and do that now before I forget. So definitely be advised and be aware, because again, I had a feeling that life as we know it is about to be a lot different. So do those things that you can. Brother Tech, where can the people find you?
Sure, you can find me all over the internet at Brother Tech. That's BROTHATECH.
And you can find me at Tech Savvy Diva everywhere. Again, to comment, to connect, to share, to support our show, definitely head on over to snobwist.com to get all those details about becoming a snobist, and also for joining our Discord community. And with that, we're going to wrap it up for this week's show.
So peace.
Thanks everybody, and take care of yourself out there.